What if the very quality you believe makes you human, your niceness, is the most efficient tool for your own destruction? You've been playing a game with the wrong rules, mistaking your greatest liability for your greatest asset. You were taught to see the world as a great ledger of accounts, a place of moral bookkeeping where goodness is a sound investment. Every time you offer a favor, without asking for one in return, you are making a deposit. Every time you swallow an insult to keep the peace, you are adding to your social capital. Every time you sacrifice your own time, your own ambition, for the sake of another's comfort, you believe you are accumulating a wealth of loyalty, a reserve of goodwill that you can draw upon in your hour of need. You operate under a single, noble, and catastrophically flawed assumption that the bank of human goodwill is a solvent institution. You believe that reciprocity is a law of nature, as reliable as gravity, and that the debts of gratitude will always be honored. This is the foundational lie. A dangerous and beautiful illusion whispered to you from your first breath, reinforced by fables and sermons, that in the grand economy of human interaction, your kindness will eventually be repaid in kind. You see yourself not merely as a good person, but as a shrewd investor in humanity, patiently waiting for your dividends of respect, support, and allegiance to mature. You have built a portfolio of selfless deeds, and you feel secure in its value. You believe you have earned your place, that you are shielded by the sheer weight of your own benevolence. But this ledger you keep is written in disappearing ink. This currency you trade in debases itself the moment it leaves your hand. And the fortress you have built with the bricks of your own kindness is, in truth, a prison of expectations, whose walls will crumble at the first tremor of human nature. You have not been investing. You have been giving away the very stones of your own foundation, one by one, mistaking the hollow echo of gratitude for the solid ring of power. Then comes the day of reckoning. The market turns. A crisis arrives not with the sound of a thunderclap, but in the silence of an unanswered call for help. This is the moment you approach the bank to make a withdrawal. You present your long account of favors given, of loyalty demonstrated, of sacrifices made. You expect you deserve the support you have so diligently cultivated. And what do you find? The vaults are empty. The tellers, whose fortunes you helped build, now stare back at you with cold, polite indifference. The men you elevated now fail to recognize your name. The promises made to you in moments of their desperation are dismissed as the hyperbole of a bygone era. They are not cruel, not necessarily. They are simply practical. Your crisis is not their crisis. Your needs are an inconvenience to their ambitions. In the brutal calculus of their self-interest, your past generosity is a sunk cost, an irrelevant entry in a ledger that was closed and burned the moment their own position was secured. This is the great bankruptcy of the nice man. He discovers too late that he was the sole believer in the currency he was trading. He learns that in the real world, gratitude is a ghost, haunting only the memory of the giver. The receiver feels no such obligation. For him, your help was not a debt to be repaid, but a resource to be consumed. And as you stand there, ruined and bewildered, you finally understand the first and most terrible truth of power. It is not built upon the shifting sands of human affection. That is where it goes to die. It is here, in the rubble of your collapsed ideals, that you meet the Florentine, not as a teacher of evil, but as a ruthless auditor of reality. Niccolo Machiavelli would not be surprised by your ruin. He would have predicted it with mathematical certainty. He understood that the most dangerous man is not the one who schemes in the shadows, but the one who operates under the delusion that men are as they should be, rather than as they are. The prince, his archetype for the effective leader, the master of his own fate, begins with one fundamental act of intellectual courage. He abandons the fantasy of human goodness. He looks upon the unvarnished nature of man and sees it for what it is. As he wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars and deceivers, fearful of danger and greedy for gain." This is not cynicism, it is a diagnosis. It is the essential, immutable variable in every equation of power. To ignore it, to build a strategy on the hope that men will rise above their nature, is to plan for a world that does not exist. It is the strategy of the fool and the martyr. The prince understands that human nature is the most volatile currency of all. He would never be so reckless as to base his security upon it. He sees that the nice man's strategy is a fatal error in risk management. The prince does not give his power away, hoping for a return. He does not invest in the flimsy promise of gratitude. Instead, he studies the mechanics of human desire. He seeks to understand what men truly covet, what they truly fear, and what they will truly do to achieve their aims. His power does not come from his generosity. It comes from his perception. It is derived from leveraging the self-interest of others, not from appealing to a better nature that exists only in poems and prayers. He knows that a man's gratitude for a past favor is a pale shadow compared to his desperate need for a future one. And so the prince does not seek to be loved for what he has given, he seeks to be needed for what he alone can provide. To build your fortress on the goodwill of others is to build upon quicksand. For as the Florentine taught, love is held by a chain of obligation which, since men are frail, is broken at every opportunity for their own profit. But fear is held by a dread of punishment which will never fail you. Comment: leverage over liability. If you are ready to trade illusion for influence, and subscribe for the coming lessons on the architecture of power, so you have accepted the grim diagnosis of human nature. You have witnessed the bankruptcy of benevolence. But this knowledge, while essential, is merely the beginning. It is the physician's report confirming the disease. It is not the cure. To languish in this newfound cynicism is its own form of paralysis. The nice man, stripped of his illusions, simply becomes the bitter man, another piece of driftwood in the relentless current of events. He remains a creature of circumstance, a passive object upon which the world acts. He has merely exchanged a pleasant dream for a waking nightmare. He is still a servant, but now he serves a harsher master, the chaotic, indifferent, and untamable goddess the ancients called Fortuna. She is the tempestuous river of fate, the sudden storm, the unforeseen betrayal, the turn of the wheel that elevates jesters and topples kings. The good man prays to her, hoping his piety will be rewarded with calm waters. The bitter man curses her, convinced she has conspired against him. Both make the same fundamental error. Both believe they are at her mercy. They see themselves as passengers on a ship they cannot steer, and so they spend their lives reacting to the weather, to the tides, to the whims of the waves. This is the second and more profound lie you must unlearn, the belief that you are not the architect of your own reality. To break this servitude, you must embrace the doctrine that separates the prince from the pauper, the master from the masses. You must cultivate virtù. Do not confuse this with the modern, sterile concept of virtue. The Florentine's virtù has no patience for meekness or moral purity. It is a force of nature in itself. It is the fusion of strategic intellect, audacious courage, disciplined preparation, and an unyielding will to impose order upon the chaos of existence. It is the human capacity to shape destiny rather than simply endure it. The man of virtù does not pray for the river of Fortuna to be gentle. He recognizes her for what she is, a destructive force that, if left unchecked, will sweep away everything he builds. And so, during the seasons of calm, when others are idle and complacent, he is at work. He surveys the landscape. He charts the river's historical course, and he begins to build. He lays the foundations of dams and dikes. He digs diversionary canals. He erects barriers, not with the foolish hope of stopping the river entirely, but with the profound strategic aim of directing its power, of channeling its destructive energy toward ends of his own choosing. He understands, as Machiavelli wrote, that Fortuna shows her power where virtù and wisdom have not prepared to resist her. She is a goddess who yields only to the bold, to those who treat her not with reverence, but with a calculated and forceful hand. This is the essence of your transformation. You must cease to be a resident of the world and become its architect. The nice man accepts the floor plan he is given. He decorates his cell, tends his small garden, and hopes the landlord is kind. The man of virtù designs the entire edifice. His every action is a calculated element of a larger blueprint. He does not ask for permission. He establishes facts on the ground. He does not hope for opportunities. He creates the conditions in which opportunities are inevitable. While the common man is consumed by the trivialities of the day, The strategist is thinking in terms of structure, of foundations, of load-bearing walls. He understands that a reputation for reliability is a pillar. A unique and indispensable skill is a cornerstone. A network of allies bound by mutual self-interest, not flimsy affection, is the steel frame that allows him to build higher than his rivals. He internalizes the great architectural principle of power. What is built with deliberation and foresight in times of peace is what will stand in the tempests of conflict. Your life, your career, your legacy, these are not things you find. They are things you construct. And virtue is the sublime and ruthless skill of that construction. This leads us to the most practical question of architecture. With what materials will you build? With what tools will you defend your creation? Here, we arrive at the second pillar of autonomy, the doctrine of own arms. A prince, Machiavelli insists, must have no other object, no other thought, nor take anything for his art, but war and its rules and discipline. This war is the perpetual struggle to establish and maintain your state. And in this war, the weapons you choose determine your fate. The nice man, in his chronic dependency, fights exclusively with borrowed arms, armi altrui. These are the weapons of the weak. They are the approval of his superiors, the consensus of his peers, the affection of his subordinates, the mercy of his adversaries. He makes a request, hoping the authority of another will grant it. He voices an opinion, hoping the agreement of the group will validate it. He performs a service, hoping the gratitude of the recipient will protect him. These are not tools of power, they are pleas for it. They are borrowed because they are never truly under your command. The superior can be replaced. The group's opinion can shift like the desert sands. Affection can curdle into resentment overnight. To rely on such things is to place the keys to your own fortress in the hands of potential enemies. You become a mercenary in your own campaign, perpetually vulnerable, forever fighting with weapons that can be turned against you at a moment's notice. The sovereign strategist, the true architect of his dominion, relies only on his own arms, propria armi. These are the weapons he has forged himself in the fires of his own discipline and intellect. They are beholden to no one. What are these arms? They are your specific, undeniable competencies, skills so developed that they make you necessary. They are your independent resources, which free you from the need to ask for permission. They are your unwavering self-reliance, which makes you immune to flattery and intimidation alike. They are your reputation for ironclad resolve, the universal knowledge that your word once given is a law of physics and your threats are never idle. These arms cannot be taken from you. They do not depend on anyone's mood, opinion, or favor. Authority derived from your own arms is absolute and intrinsic. It is the authority of the master craftsman in his workshop, the seasoned general on the battlefield. It does not request respect. It commands it through sheer, demonstrable capability. When a man who fights with borrowed arms enters a negotiation, he asks, "What will you let me have?" When a man who wields his own arms enters, he states, "Here are the terms." The former is a beggar. The latter is a force of reality. Therefore, your task is to conduct a ruthless inventory of your arsenal. Identify every area where you depend on the goodwill of others, and see it for the strategic vulnerability it is. Then begin the slow, arduous work of replacing those borrowed swords with armor and weapons of your own making. Cultivate a skill until you are the only one who can wield it. Build your resources until you are your own patron. Discipline your mind until your own counsel is the only one you require. This is the path to true sovereignty. Virtue is the will of the architect. Own arms are his stone and steel. Together they construct the only structure that can withstand the ravages of fortuna and the treachery of men, the unbreachable fortress of your own autonomy. You have laid the foundations of your autonomy. With the architect's mind of virtue and the solid materials of your own arms, you have constructed a fortress of self-reliance. You are no longer a victim of fortuna, no longer dependent on the fickle goodwill of others. But a fortress, however strong, exists within a larger landscape. It is surrounded by cities, by villages, by people. And now that you no longer need them for your survival, you face a more subtle and insidious temptation, the desire to be celebrated by them for your strength. This is the siren's call of affection, the deep, primal human yearning to be not just respected, but loved. It is the final illusion that the aspiring prince must conquer, for it is a weakness that comes disguised as a strength, a poison offered in a golden chalice. The common man believes that to be loved is the ultimate validation of power. Machiavelli teaches that it is the most common and catastrophic expenditure of it. You must begin to think of public perception not as a matter of emotion, but as a ruthless economy of influence. In this economy, love is a currency with ruinous inflation. To purchase it, you must engage in a bottomless expenditure of concessions, favors, and acts of liberality. The people's appetite for generosity is infinite. Each gift you give does not satisfy them, but merely raises their expectation for the next. You enter into an unspoken contract where you are perpetually in their debt, obligated to maintain the flow of benefits, lest their affections sour into resentment. You become predictable, your decisions held hostage by the need to maintain your popularity. You soften your stance, you delay necessary but unpleasant actions, you compromise your long-term strategy for the sake of short-term applause. The pursuit of love makes a ruler liberal with resources that are not his to waste, his authority, his decisiveness, and the security of his state. It is a fool's bargain, trading the granite of command for the confection of praise. The prince understands this grim arithmetic. He knows that love is an asset held in the hearts of others, making it utterly beyond his control. It can be withdrawn for any reason, a perceived slight, a disappointing decision, the slick promises of a rival. To base one's power on such an ephemeral sentiment is to be the master of nothing. Therefore, the master strategist turns his attention to a more stable, more reliable foundation: fear. Not the wild, arbitrary terror of the tyrant, which breeds only hatred and conspiracy, but a calculated, rational, and predictable fear of consequence. Love is a feeling. Fear is an analysis. A subject feels love, and that feeling can change with the weather. A subject analyzes fear, weighing the certain cost of defiance against the potential benefit of obedience. In this calculation, the prince always holds the advantage. For as the Florentine observed, men have less hesitation in offending one who is loved than one who is feared. Love is a bond of obligation that men, being wicked, will break whenever it serves their purpose. But fear is strengthened by a dread of punishment which is always effective. This fear is not the goal in itself. It is the tool. It is the cold, hard perimeter fence around your authority. It is the silent understanding in every room that your decisions are not suggestions. It is the quiet respect that is born not from warmth but from the undeniable presence of strength, and the certainty that transgressions will be met with a swift and proportionate response. The prince does not wish for his people to tremble in his presence. He wishes for them to think twice before they consider betraying him. This brings us to the most vital and misunderstood tightrope walk in the entire art of power, the razor's edge between being feared and being hated. To fall on one side is to be ineffective. To fall on the other is to be deposed. The amateur confuses fear with cruelty and aggression. He lashes out, makes examples, and rules through intimidation. This is not strategy. It is a failure of nerve. This behavior does not create fear. It cultivates hatred, the most potent and unifying acid in politics. Hatred is not a calculation. It is a primal passion. A man who fears you will obey you to protect himself. A man who hates you will risk his own destruction for the chance to bring about yours. So how does the prince command fear without inciting hatred? Machiavelli provides a brutally simple and timeless formula. He must abstain from the property of his subjects and from their women. He must not touch what men consider primarily theirs, their wealth and their honor. A man will more quickly forget the death of his father than the loss of his patrimony. The prince can execute a rival, punish a traitor, wage a necessary war, and he will be feared. But if he seizes a man's land, confiscates his fortune, or violates his family, he will be hated. Predatory actions create irreconcilable enemies. The prudent prince ensures that any necessary acts of severity are seen as punishments for specific transgressions, not as the whims of a rapacious ruler. Just as he must avoid hatred, he must also avoid being despised. Contempt is the silent killer of authority. While hatred is an active fire, contempt is a creeping rot that dissolves the very foundations of respect. A ruler becomes contemptible when he is seen as irresolute, frivolous, effeminate, cowardly, or indecisive. He is despised when his words are seen as empty, his threats as bluffs, and his presence as inconsequential. Contempt is the people's belief that you are no longer a factor in their calculations. They do not need to overthrow you. They can simply ignore you. Therefore, the prince must imbue his every action with a sense of gravitas, of unshakable purpose. His decisions must be final. His public appearances must project greatness of spirit and strength of mind. He must, as Machiavelli wrote, contrive that his actions show grandeur, courage, gravity, and fortitude. This creates an aura of authority so powerful that the very thought of challenging him seems absurd. The prince stands on a narrow precipice. Below him on one side is the abyss of hatred, fueled by rapacity. On the other is the swamp of contempt, bred by weakness. His safe path is the high ground of profound respect, born of a fear that is managed with the precision of a surgeon. He does not need the people's love, he needs their obedience. He achieves this not by warming their hearts, but by commanding their minds. He makes himself a force of nature in their world, consistent, powerful, and utterly unavoidable. You have learned the grim grammar of human nature and the austere architecture of autonomy. You have navigated the treacherous strait between hatred and contempt. But knowledge of the principles is not the same as the mastery of the art. A man who has memorized a dictionary is not a poet, and a strategist who has merely fortified his own position remains a prisoner, albeit a well-guarded one. Before we unveil the final act of power, the masterstroke that separates the transient ruler from the enduring founder, ensure you are subscribed. For the ultimate wisdom is reserved not for those who seek to survive the game, but for those who intend to change the very board upon which it is played. The final stage of your evolution requires you to confront the most intimate of your enemies, your own ego. The nice man was governed by his need for approval. The amateur tyrant is governed by his appetite for control. Both, in their own way, are slaves to the personal. Their power is a direct reflection of their presence, their moods, their whims. They must be in the room to make a decision. They must hear the pleas, judge the merits, and dispense the verdicts themselves. Their entire domain is a sprawling, chaotic court of supplicants, a system that relies entirely on their personal intervention. This is not strength. It is a critical structural flaw. A dominion that rests upon the shoulders of one man, no matter how strong, is fatally brittle. It is vulnerable to his exhaustion, his biases, his mortality. When he falters, the entire edifice cracks. When he is gone, it collapses into dust. This is the destiny of the man who makes himself the indispensable center of his world. He becomes its single point of failure. The true masterstroke, the grand and final act of virtue, is not an act of aggression, but an act of profound strategic sublimation. It is the substitution of the man for the institution. The prince's ultimate objective is not to be the indispensable man, but to create an indispensable system. He must embark on the most difficult of all creative endeavors, forging an apparatus of power that functions with its own inexorable logic, independent of his own hand. He must transition from being the engine of his state to being its ghost in the machine. This is his final and greatest creation. He does not rule by decree, he rules by design. He exchanges the artist's brush, which requires his constant touch, for the architect's blueprint, which stands on its own integrity. He does not mete out justice, he builds a courthouse. He does not grant favors, he establishes a transparent process. He does not resolve disputes, he codifies the law. Every rule he writes, every procedure he implements, every clear line of authority he draws is a piece of himself made permanent and impersonal. This act requires the coldest and most difficult of all disciplines, the willingness to be bound by one's own creation. The system must apply to everyone, including its creator. When the prince submits to his own laws, he performs a kind of political alchemy. He transforms his personal will, which is mortal and fallible, into institutional authority, which is perpetual and impartial. He demonstrates that the power resides not in him, but in the order he has founded. This is the source of its legitimacy and its endurance. The subjects of such a state do not obey the man, they obey the structure. Their loyalty is not to a personality which can disappoint them, but to a system which provides them with consistency and predictability. This is a far more stable and profound form of control. The prince has made his authority a feature of the landscape itself, as undeniable and ever-present as a mountain range. He no longer needs to be feared personally, because the consequences of defying the system are now a matter of cold, impersonal certainty. This then is the legacy of the architect. The nice man, if he is remembered at all, is recalled through the fading mist of personal anecdotes. The tyrant leaves behind a legacy of scars and the bitter taste of oppression. But the prince who builds an institution leaves behind a living, breathing entity. He founds a company with a culture so strong it outlives its founders. He establishes a family with principles so clear they guide generations. He forges a state with laws so sound they provide stability through the ages. His victory is not in the battles he has won, but in the future battles that no longer need to be fought. His ultimate achievement is to have made his own virtue obsolete, replaced by the smooth, relentless turning of the gears of the machine he built. This is the transcendence of power. It ceases to be about the ambitions of one man and becomes about the preservation of an order. It is the final philosophical answer to the dangerous lie of being nice. The purpose was never to be liked or even to be feared. The purpose was to be effective. It was to stare into the abyss of human chaos and, instead of recoiling, to build a bridge across it, a structure of such magnificent and ruthless design that others may walk upon it for centuries, never knowing the name of the man who broke himself in the quarry cutting the stone. He did not build a stage for his own glory. He built a throne that would endure.